Hello, I'm Declan Henderson, registered dietitian working for Wiltshire Farm Foods, and I'm really excited to be bringing you this video collaboration with the British Dietetic Association. Today we'll be challenging a speech and language therapist, Lindsey Collins, and dietitians Laura Clarke and Alison Smith to create an IDDSI Level 4 Puréed meal from a Wiltshire Farm Foods IDDSI Level 7 roast beef dinner. Why are we doing this? Well, because we know how important it is to raise awareness of the practical implications of dysphagia that your patients may face, and ensure that after you've watched this video, you'll have some takeaways you can put into practice. So let's get started. Now it's time to meet the dietitians and speech and language therapists taking part in today's Ready Steady Blend challenge. Lindsey, we're so happy that you could join us today. Could you please give us a little bit of an introduction to yourself, your roles and your responsibilities?
Yes, I'm Lindsey Collins. I'm a speech and language therapist, and my role in terms of dysphagia is to assess people to find out if they have a dysphagia, what the presentation of that might be, and to work with individuals to help them to explore eating and drinking so that they can continue to have food and drink in a way that's enjoyable but also as safe as possible.
So I'm also joined today by Alison Smith. Alison, could you please give us a little bit of an introduction as to your background, your roles, your responsibilities at the moment? Absolutely.
So I'm a dietitian. I've been qualified a frighteningly long time now, and I've worked with older adults for well over 20 years. A lot of that spent working with people in their own homes and working with people in care homes, and a lot of the people I've worked with as older adults do experience dysphagia, so I've had a long interest in dysphagia and in modifying texture of foods and enabling somebody to meet their nutritional needs even when their foods are modified.
So could you please tell us a little bit about why it's so important that we use the correct information when and sort of language when we're discussing dysphagia?
Absolutely. A lot of it is so that we all speak the same language, so that everybody understands the same thing when we refer to a modified texture of food as being, say, pureed or minced and moist, that everybody knows what that means. If we just refer to something as soft, for example, it could mean a multitude of things, and it's hard to know if that's the correct texture as advised by a speech and language therapist for that particular patient. So we really need to make sure that we know what the right language is so that we can use it and communicate with each other as healthcare and care professionals.
Absolutely, so we want to be specific and on the same page.
We do.
Thanks both. I'd like to introduce now Laura, who is a dietitian and a dysphagia practitioner. Laura, can you please tell me about your role in the management of dysphagia?
Yep, so as you said, I'm a dysphagia trained dietitian. So I've completed the same master's course as many speech and language therapists. So my role is to diagnose dysphagia or identify the symptoms, as Lindsey said, exactly what she's mentioned in that process, and then provide a management plan in terms of the dysphagia side of things, but also looking at their dietetic needs. So obviously for patients who are under kind of both therapists or both services, that can be really effective for them. So in terms of, if we think of modified texture diets and thickened fluids, we're aware of the nutritional implications it can have on a person's status, on their outcomes, on their options. So having that kind of holistic care and from one clinician and that support, it can be a little bit more timely for that as well. So it can be really helpful for those patients.
Thank you very much, Laura. So we're all aware how important it can be for dietitians to work as part of a multidisciplinary team, particularly when we're looking at a complex symptom such as dysphagia, where there may be the need for input from many different fields of clinicians. Lindsey, could you please tell me a little bit more about how dietitians and speech and language therapists can work together effectively to ensure the best outcome for patients?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the main thing is about clear channels of communication, really, being really aware of each other's roles and responsibilities. Oftentimes, speech and language therapists and dietitians do work closely together in the same teams, but for some dietitians and speech and language therapists, they might work in different teams and not have such close contact. So I think really it's about making sure that we pick up the phone and speak to each other, talk about individual cases, discuss what our thoughts are, but really it's those clear channels of communication, knowledge of what each other's doing that I think is so important. And that would be across the whole multidisciplinary team. So thinking about speech and language therapists and dietitians, but also thinking about other allied health professions we might work with, other medical staff, nursing staff that we might work with. So making sure we're being really clear. And as Alison was saying as well, it's about using language that everybody understands. So making sure that we're consistent in the way that we communicate with each other as well.
So Alison, please, from your experience, could you tell us a little bit more about the benefits of an effective handover between dietitians and speech and language therapists to really support person-centred outcomes?
Absolutely. I think this follows on quite well from what Lindsey was saying about talking to each other, because I think that is the key. It's that collaboration and that communication. That as a dietitian, yes, we need to know what the speech and language therapist has advised the patient. We also need to know what the patient has understood by that, and what the patient is wanting to do with that information. And then, of course, we're going to translate that into meeting the person's nutritional needs, or enabling the person to hopefully meet their nutritional needs. So it's almost a three-way communication between us, the speech and language therapists, and the patient, to make sure, again, we're all speaking the same language and we're all understanding what it is that the person's been advised to do and what they are planning to do with that information. And then we can obviously effectively add the nutrition part onto that.
Excellent. I think there's some clear themes developing today around communication, collaboration, and clearly that's a takeaway for everyone. So Laura, I think speech and language therapists and dietitians are likely out there, in the field today, using the IDDSI framework. Could you tell us a little bit more about what IDDSI is and maybe why it was developed and implemented?
Yep, so IDDSI stands for the International Dysphagia Diet Standardisation Initiative. It's the IDDSI framework. It's made up of a continuum of levels. So you've got level 0 to level 7. So your level 0 to level 4 is for fluids. Then you've got a slight overlap for diet, which is the diet is level 4 to level 7. So the levels can be identified through the numbers, but they can also be identified through text, so the names, and also the colour codes. So that kind of helps improve and increase the safety and the kind of identification of each level. So it was brought into place to globally standardise the kind of terminology and the definitions that we use for texture modified diets and thickened fluids. So it can be used for individuals that have got dysphagia who are of all ages, like Lindsey said, from all cultures, and also like in all care settings as well. So just to provide that standardisation. Sort
of links back to having a common, speaking the same language.
Yeah, definitely.
Great. Right, so thank you everyone for all of your brilliant insights, and I'm sure there's a lot of really important information there for our viewers at home to digest and take away and use in their clinical work. So it's really important for our dietitians out there to understand what the practical implications might be of living with dysphagia. Often individuals are going to be blending their meals at home, and I think it's really important today that we see what it might be like to have a go at this with our Ready Steady Blend challenge. Now we've got a bit of a case study to sort of frame what we're going to be doing today. So your auntie has been living with dementia for several years now, and as her condition has deteriorated, so has her swallow. At a recent speech and language therapy assessment, the speech and language therapist recommended that your aunt now requires a level 4 Puréed diet. You know that she loves a Sunday roast, as we all do, so we are challenging you to produce a IDDSI Level 4 roast beef dinner out of a standard texture IDDSI Level 7 roast beef dinner. So in front of you, you have equipment, materials, ingredients that you would normally find at home in a domestic setting, and your challenge is, as I say, to produce that meal using these things you have in front of you. So, ready, steady, blend. So what's your sort of immediate challenges that you're facing as we've started off?
Okay, so I've blended the beef I just put it in whole, and then I've put some gravy in, but I've made it too thin. So now I'm trying to thicken it, and at the minute I'm using gravy granules, but I'm automatically thinking the salt content of the gravy granules that I'm now adding to make it thicker, so hopefully I can find some corn flour to make that a little bit thicker. And because at the minute it does need sieving because it's not quite smooth, but I think we are almost getting there with the consistency at level 4.
What's your plan for the rest of the meal?
I think I'm going to go with the potatoes next, and Lindsay's just gave me a good tip to take the skin off the potatoes, so just actually use the potato because that might be quite difficult to blend. So, and I'm going to do each individual food separately, so then we can place it on each of the plates so you can specifically see which is the beef, which is the broccoli, which is the carrot, so obviously the patient will know and be able to differentiate between the textures and the flavours.
I made a slight error that I didn't peel my potatoes before blending them, so I've just popped them through the sieve just to take out the skins to make them a little bit smoother. So yeah, it's I think getting there. So I decided to start with the potatoes and then start on the next bit. We've got a nice variety of foods to try there. So.
But to be honest, the biggest challenge is going to be keeping food hot, because actually you're not going to be able to keep it hot when you're pureeing individual items if you're starting with a hot meal already. So obviously you're going to need to reheat food, which then comes with its own challenges of if it's reheated unevenly, it will start to basically solidify around the edges and not to be hot in the middle. So it's all of those. But also as a dietitian, I'm thinking about nutritional information, about basically how do we make this food as nutritious as possible. And I'm also thinking about when you puree food, you have to add a liquid to it in order for it to puree. And then I need to add a liquid that isn't going to change the flavour of the food categorically.
So, Laura, what emotions are you sort of feeling at the moment as you go through this process?
It's a little bit stressful, to be honest, because every different food, for example, the beef, I've blended that, but I haven't actually blended the potato, and then I've just put a little bit of butter in with the carrot, and I feel like it's already too thin. So I'm having difficulty with things that are too thin, and I'm trying to think of ways to thicken it back up because I'm not experienced. So again, if you're a patient or you're a carer and you're doing this for the first time, you know, it's going to take a really long time. It's going to be quite a stressful process of actually trying to make sure you've got the right texture, everything's sieved, there's no bits, there's things like that. So it's very difficult.
It looks like you've made some efforts to make this look appealing. Can you talk us through your?
Effort is definitely the word.
Could you talk us through your strategy here? What you've done to make it look nice?
So I thought, well, if I'm working on the basis that I'm in a person's home kitchen, then I'm not going to have chefy things, and I'm unlikely to be able to sort of make tin bowls with little cups and things, and I'm certainly unlikely to be piping anything.
Thank you very much to our clinicians for their attempt at the Ready Steady Blend Challenge. So how did you get on? How did you find it?
Very difficult.
Yeah, it was quite tricky.
Challenging.
Yeah, some things were I think easier maybe than others.
Yes, certain texture foods are easy to blend, I think.
Yeah.
And sort of starting off over here with you, Alison, how did you find getting the compliance right, and what was your approach there?
It was a bit hit and miss. I think the challenge is every single element, there were different challenges to it. So the potatoes went gluey with blending. So I don't think the texture's quite right on those. The sprouts were almost impossible to get smooth. I'm proud of my carrots. I think they are the right texture, but like Lindsay, I had to sieve them, which is time consuming. The Yorkshire pudding, exactly the same thing. It just is not smooth at all. And unfortunately, I added all of the gravy with my meat, so the meat is too runny. So I'm going to say I'm really proud of the carrot, but actually that was still hard work to achieve. So yeah.
How about yourselves? How did you find the compliance and the testing? And
so I think one of the things is just more gradually adding the liquids. Like Alison was saying, if you add too much at the start, it's really hard to undo it to then make it thicker again. So it's that kind of gradually adding the fluids and kind of testing as you go. And I think we probably all found that we kind of checked in with each other, which, you know, for someone at home who's doing this, they're not going to be able to do that. Whereas we could kind of go, do you think this potato's about right? And we could check out with each other, couldn't we? But doing the kind of testing with the fork and with the spoon as you go through, and then I know, Alison, you've checked yours again as you've, before you've put it down on the top. So yeah, it's that just checking really, isn't it, as you go through and just doing things quite gradually. But there's implications of that, that then it's, it starts to go cold and it changes the texture as it starts to cool as well.
Or warm up at the same.
Warm up,
And I think it depends on the type of equipment somebody's got at home. That's not something we would kind of recommend because we've not really experienced in doing that. But from today, like a hand blender was much easier than the kind of blenders that you kind of plug in. So just little things like that you wouldn't naturally pick up without actually trying it yourself and doing it yourself.
So would you recommend fellow dietitians, speech and language therapists, any sort of profession having a go at this?
Oh yeah,
absolutely, definitely.
Yeah.
Please do it.
You learn by doing, and it's the thing is, you know the theory, but knowing the theory is different from how it works in practice.
And it's having empathy, isn't it? That some people are doing this for all their meals. That it's about understanding that what we're asking people to do. That we're asking you to make this every meal that you're going through this process for. So again, it's about making sure then that we're only recommending it if people really need it, or perhaps thinking about, are there some elements that need modification, some that don't, so that we can make sure that we're
it's
helping.
It's really person-centred as well.
It really
Absolutely,
definitely.
And it's still listening to what the person wants. Because even if you get it perfect, it's still pureed food.
And they
some
still
people
might not
don't
like
want.
that.
And some people don't want to do that.
So it's their choices as well.
Exactly.
Could be quite taxing for a number of reasons, I think.
Yeah.
Right, so we're going to have a little taste of the Wiltshire Farm Foods Puréed Petite Beef in Gravy. And our speech and language therapist for the day is going to do some IDDSI testing. It's just a nice example of what may be available to patients out there at the moment as an alternative to potentially home blending.
Fantastic. So I'll start with the potato. So yeah, it's all nice and thick, holding its shape there quite nicely. And what we want is to see that it falls off the spoon, not leaving too much residue, and it all just falls off in one go. So, yep, got the potato. There's another fork, and you can see there already that it's keeping its shape on the beef, not dropping through. Lovely. Put that on there. Yep. So again, we can see. There, and then we've got some lovely peas. Can I have another fork, please, Alison? Thank you so much. And this is, I suppose, it's similar with the ones that we've prepared as well, that as the temperature changes, they do start to change the texture a little bit, don't they? But, it's following the guidelines. It's still nice and hot. So, yeah, nice. Testing all of that. So yeah, it's looking good in terms of compliance. It's looking good, and I suppose it's down to the taste as well.
So that's a really good point, Lindsay. I think you're right, it's all in the taste. So we've got some fantastic meals to share with you now from the Wiltshire Farm Foods Softer Foods range. So these are an alternative to making meals at home. Patients where they'll be home blending do also have the option of meal delivery service through Wiltshire Farm. So we have a selection of level 4 meals here today to have a little taste with our clinicians. So we have a cheese toastie, a hot chocolate cake, a chicken tikka masala, a fish and chips, a shepherd's pie, and a sticky toffee pudding. So please feel free to have a taste, do some IDDSI testing, and maybe give a little bit of feedback to everyone watching at home.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. I'll pass them to you. There you go.
Thank you.
What are you going for?
Well, we'll start with savoury, I think. Might go for the cheese toastie.
Yeah, super.
Okay.
I think I'm going to go for the cheese toast as well. That's a nice vegetarian one. So let's have a little look here. So yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, when you see what it looks like compared to what it feels like.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay.
And it's definitely holding its shape.
Yeah. It is.
It did. It
felt
beautiful.
Yeah, you tested that beautifully.
I did.
You can taste the difference between the bread and the cheese.
Yeah, it's got a nice layering there as well, so you can see, what's what.
Yeah, it's nice and smooth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Good flavour.
Yeah, it's quite strong, the cheese, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In a good way.
Yeah.
You can taste it.
We use several different types of starch and to thicken these level 4 meals. What would you recommend maybe patients look at using at home, for example?
We generally recommend using food ingredients. So obviously if you're going to be heating something up afterwards, then things like corn flour will work. There's obviously sort of other commercial sort of home thickeners that you can use, things like agar. Agar can work for people who are vegetarian, and that, I think I'm right in saying that one thickens without having to be heated.
Right, yeah.
You can also use potato. You can basically sort of, again, it's a case of sort of trying things out.
So we like the cheese toasty?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cheese
Fantastic.
toasty is good.
And I've tried that. And again, cream of rice, it's really tasty. Yeah.
Brilliant. The chicken tikka masala is one of my personal favourites.
Is it? I might try the, do you want to try anything else? Do you want to try it?
I will try the
Yeah,
pudding.
go for
I mean,
the
absolutely.
dessert.
Sticky toffee pudding is
I'm gonna
a
try
particular
this. Nice.
favourite amongst
Yeah.
many of the patients that we cater for.
It's definitely one of my favourites.
Very mild, so not too spicy.
Actually, I
gonna
just
say,
won't double dip.
You've given me the confidence to try it because
Oh, yeah.
I'm a
That
complete
smells
wuss
lovely.
when it comes to curries.
It's
so-
not particularly spicy, it's mild, but it's got nice authentic tikka flavour.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
Make sure the spices are cooked out nicely and things like that.
And then I think I'm just going to try the chips. I like how it's brown, so I'm going to...
Oh, that sticky toffee's nice.
Yeah,
good?
it's gluten free as well, which is really good.
Yeah, it's yeah, because again you get the different flavours between the two different aspects of it. It's nice.
Chips.
Taste like chips.
Yeah.
What's great about the chips is we actually have a different flavour profile for
Yeah.
our starchy carbohydrates. So our mash is nice and creamy, whereas
Yes.
our chips we put a bit more oil in, salt and vinegar to
Yeah.
make it taste. It's not just all
Authentic.
mash in different shapes, which
Yeah.
is really nice.
Absolutely.
Makes it authentic, doesn't it?
So if you're comparing this to kind of the exercise, our ready steady blend we did earlier, how might this benefit a patient, for example, in their own home?
I mean, I think it's like I suppose with any of us that it's helpful to have a convenience meal, isn't it? Really, that if you don't have the time or the inclination to cook something,
Or the resources.
absolutely, or perhaps you've got a busy day, you know, you just want a day off. You know, we might put a pizza in the oven or something. You know, something that you can just cook really quickly, or a microwave meal. And I suppose it's that. It's the same for if someone's on a modified diet.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean they're not going to want a day off cooking.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
And so it's really helpful to, I suppose, have that as
As
an
a backup.
option, as
Yeah.
well as having some home cooked, some naturally blended foods, and then some ready-made meals that you can just heat up if you don't want to cook from scratch.
Regardless of whatever health condition or symptom you're living with, everyone deserves to have that choice, that variety,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that flexibility to have whatever meal it may be at whatever time, really. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
grand. So, thank you very much, all three of you, for coming today and having our tasting session, taking part in our Ready Steady Blend. It's been absolutely fantastic. For Dietitians Week, we're challenging you to take part in our hashtag Ready Steady Blend challenge. Using the hashtags and tagging @WiltshireFarmFoods and @BDA_dietitians into your post, and you could be in with a chance of winning a Fortnum & Mason hamper. You can find other resources on the topic of dysphagia at the BDA website, the IDDSI website, the RCSLT website, and also our own dedicated site, specialistnutrition.com. We'd like to say a big thank you to everyone watching, and we'd hope you enjoyed from the BDA and Wiltshire Farm Foods.